Holding the magazine in my hands, I stared at Julian grinning back at me from the glossy front cover. The bold headline crowned him as the solitary genius who built a multi-billion-dollar tech empire entirely on his own. It was a stunning portrait, lit so carefully that nobody reading it would ever guess he had not written a single line of working code in nearly a decade. To every new employee at the firm, I was just the quiet corporate attorney sitting near the back, sending out routine compliance emails. To the executive board, I was merely a line item on an expensive payroll ledger. But to the man posing for the press, I was the co-founder holding nearly half the business he was secretly trying to sell right out from underneath me. Julian truly believed that because I stayed out of the public eye, I posed no real threat to his grand ambition. He was about to learn that quiet partners do not simply fade away when you try to erase them from history. Before explaining how I collapsed his massive public offering using a single folder, it is important to understand how his carefully crafted public lie was constructed from the ground up. Our venture did not start in an expensive high-rise with sweeping views of Silicon Valley. 7 years ago, we worked out of a cramped studio apartment that smelled constantly of damp carpet and cheap energy drinks. Julian provided the magnetic charisma that could charm skeptical venture capitalists into funding our wild ideas, while I handled the complex legal framework and made sure our intellectual property was completely secure. Late one evening, sitting on the floor of that tiny apartment, we drafted our original foundational partnership agreement. Julian argued that investors would get nervous if they knew the main leadership team was romantically involved, suggesting we separate our roles completely. I agreed without hesitation, structuring a rock-solid agreement that allowed him to run daily management while tying my equity directly to the core technology itself. Under Clause 14B of our contract, my specific class of equity retained absolute veto power over any transfer or sale of our underlying software patents. Julian was so eager to chase fame that he signed the agreement without reading the protective clauses I had carefully embedded. He believed he was securing absolute freedom, but in reality, he had handed me the master key to the entire operation. Over the next 5 years, our enterprise grew at a terrifying pace as we expanded from a tiny startup into a massive industry giant. Julian traveled the world appearing on major news networks, taking full credit for the revolutionary software platform we created together. Meanwhile, I stayed quietly in the background, securing our patents, structuring our tax strategies, and ensuring every line of our core code was legally protected. As the company scaled, Julian gradually began changing the way he spoke about our shared accomplishment. The word "we" vanished from his public interviews, replaced entirely by "I" whenever he discussed our growth. I noticed the shift, but I foolishly assumed that our ironclad contracts would protect my standing regardless of how inflated his ego became during our rise to prominence. The first major breach occurred during a major $50 million investment round with a prominent venture capitalist named Vance. Julian entered my office right before the big meeting and urged me to hide my ownership column from the presentation slides to keep things simple. Against my better judgment, I agreed only after making him sign a separate side document confirming my true equity split. 3 months after securing that funding, Julian abruptly ended our personal relationship during a quiet dinner at an upscale restaurant. He claimed that we had grown apart and needed distance, using corporate buzzwords to explain why ending our romance was logical. I accepted the separation calmly, unaware that he was already plotting to eliminate my professional presence from the company as well. Within a week, I noticed subtle changes as my name suddenly disappeared from major executive meetings and leadership emails. Julian framed my exclusion as a thoughtful gesture to help me recover from the breakup, weaponizing our personal split to isolate me from critical decisions. When I checked my administrative credentials, I discovered he had revoked my primary system access across multiple internal channels. Rather than making a dramatic scene that he could use to paint me as unstable, I decided to quietly document every single violation. I created a detailed log recording every restricted file, every false public statement, and every instance where he falsely took sole credit for my work. While he believed I was retreating in defeat, I was systematically gathering the evidence needed to protect my interests. The situation escalated in December when Julian sent a company-wide memo officially demoting my role to an advisory position. Shortly after, He announced to the entire staff that we were forfeiting our executive bonuses to fund a cheap holiday pizza party for the team. I later discovered financial records proving he had quietly reimbursed himself over $100,000 under the guise of travel expenses. Standing at the back of the break room watching him celebrate with the team, I knew I could no longer stay passive. I used a forgotten emergency administrative access route I had installed years ago to inspect our confidential file repositories. Hidden deep within the drive, I discovered drafts for a massive public stock offering where Julian listed himself as the sole owner. Instead of panicking, I immediately contacted a veteran contract litigation attorney named Arthur who specialized in severe corporate disputes. After reviewing our original partnership agreement, Arthur pointed out that Julian had violated our terms by misrepresenting ownership to outside investors. Under our modified patent terms, making fraudulent claims about asset ownership automatically voided the corporate transfer and returned the patents directly to us as individuals. We knew that filing a lawsuit right away would allow Julian to offer a quiet settlement and brush the issue aside. Instead, Arthur advised me to wait until the high-profile investor kickoff event at a luxury hotel before revealing the truth. We carefully prepared a detailed legal packet containing our original contract, the signed side letters, and proof that the company did not actually own its core technology. On the morning of the major presentation, I walked into the crowded ballroom wearing a sharp suit and holding our evidence. Julian was on stage pitching our platform to top institutional investors, boasting that he owned the entire proprietary technology stack from top to bottom. That was the moment Vance stood up from the front row and publicly questioned whether there were other inventors named on the primary patents. I stepped forward from the back of the room and handed the complete legal dossier directly to the lead investment bankers. As they read through Clause 14b and realized the company lacked clear title to its primary product, the lead underwriters immediately canceled the public offering. Julian watched in absolute shock as his multi-billion-dollar valuation vanished in a matter of seconds before the entire audience. The public scandal completely destroyed the enterprise within a week, forcing the board to terminate Julian from his position. While the original corporate stock value dropped to zero, the core software patents reverted entirely to my personal control under our original terms. Today, I run a modest development firm alongside a few trusted colleagues, building software on a foundation of complete honesty and shared respect.